My name is Dr. Mary Lou Hill. I teach in ACS. I know a bunch of you, so thank you for being here. And I'm very, very pleased to be welcoming our guest tonight, Dr. Kim Paffenroth. I first met him about 12 years ago when he was teaching here at Villanova as a postdoctoral fellow. And at that time, I was first intrigued by the fact that he is a die-hard Judas Priest fan. I don't know if any of you even know who Judas Priest is. Okay, got some nods. Okay, so he's a die-hard Judas Priest fan, and I was intrigued, and then to discover that he is not Judas Priest, but Dr. Paffenroth is a theologian by trade, and he has written many wonderful books of theology, exploring a myriad of issues, but among the things he has talked about or has written about is St. Augustine, who many of you or all of you have read this semester. But his most recent project, and the reason we brought him here tonight, is he has turned to writing horror novels. And I don't know about you, but when I first learned that a theologian would think about writing horror novels, I found it a little startling. And you can tell they're not just horror novels, they're specifically zombie novels. And what was especially intriguing for us is that his most recent novel combines Dante, and specifically Dante's Inferno, with zombies. What a great idea, what a great concept. And so he's going to talk with us about that tonight. But I will mention a few of his other titles, and you can see some of the free materials back there. Gospel of the Living Dead, George Romero's Visions of Hell on Earth, and that won the Bram Stoker Award. He has written a series of horror novels, the Dying to Live series. It's on book 3 now? Book 3. So if you are fascinated by the genre especially, they're a great read. I would really encourage you to pick them up. But without further ado, I'm just very pleased to welcome Dr. Kim Paffenroth.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, and thank you all for coming tonight. In addition to the way I have those comments laid out here, Dr. Hill asked me maybe partly answer her question of why do I do this, what led me to this, and I suppose it's sort of implied in the way I laid it out here on the sheet, but maybe I could give the anecdotal version. When I was a little bit younger than you, quite a bit younger than you, when I was 13, I just got fascinated with zombie movies. I saw the original Dawn of the Dead in the theater. And I don't know, the gore, the action, the violence, not so much the suspense, it's not a very suspenseful movie, but the sort of feeling of dread of the whole movie it fascinated me in, I guess, kind of a morbid teenage kind of way. Now, I think, like most people that age, I wasn't really able to articulate what I thought or what I felt about that experience, more than, zombies are cool. Right? So I couldn't really get past that. And I didn't really think about them one way or the other for 20-some years. And closer to your age, when the Dawn of the Dead remake came out in 2004, I was taken back to that experience and fascinated again. Except by that time I was aged quite a bit, and I had, I think, some ability maybe to articulate what I found compelling, frightening, interesting about this particular monster. And working in my own work, first nonfiction, and then I had this crazy idea that's been kind of fun since then to work into fictional work. And I do think, in general, something that's often overlooked is that all art, all fiction, has to deal, I think, yeah, it does. It has to deal somehow with good and evil. Horror, of course, focuses rather more morbidly and darkly on the evil side, but I don't think necessarily in a way that's, not at all in a way that's irrelevant to theological reflection or to religious thought or to our lives of faith. Because if you have any kind of faith, it has to offer some kind of account of why all this bad stuff is here. You know, whether the bad stuff is cancer or zombies or people being hit by cars or war or whatever. It has to offer some reason for that, unless it's just going to say, well, this is all random. All right? And I think either literature or religion comes down very firmly on the idea that these things most definitely are not random. They mean something. They're interesting and compelling in some way, not like just random acts or gears grinding in some meaningless sort of system. All right, that's kind of my general comments of how I came to be before you today talking about what I'm talking about. I will try very hard to have 10 minutes or even 15 at the end for questions, because I would love to hear what you have to say about zombies. So, zombies. You may have noticed, they're a big deal. They're like the monster of the beginning of the 21st century. In fact, I'd say, you know, up until Twilight hit, it was like there wasn't any other monster out there, either especially in film, but increasingly in other media. They seem to have captured people's imagination and captured people's imagination in a very broad swath, and that's really one of the interesting things about them. Is that they went from a very narrow subculture. There have been people who, like me, liked zombies years and years ago, and some of them kept up with the various manifestations of them over the years, unlike me. But it didn't really catch on. So you had a very small, fanatical kind of core of zombie fans, but up until 10, 12 years ago, you didn't have anything that would affect the rest of the culture, or that the normal average person would be interested in. But then, unlike other subcultures or other subgenres, it expanded to be of interest and be popular amongst a very wide population and appeal to people as well, in addition to the hardcore fan, but people with more casual interest in it. I think more than any other monster, more than any other kind of horror genre or manifestation of horrific things, zombies are very good across different forms of media. They really took off in their recent manifestation, especially under the influence of video games. Again, when I first experienced zombies, it was a purely film phenomenon. Starting with Resident Evil, of course, and everything that spun out from that, they became very much associated with video games. It then spilled over in books, in comic books, everything. All right? And, moreover, not just in things that appeal to the horror fan, but things that appeal to a much broader audience. I mean, when I talk to a horror convention versus when I talk to a more diverse group like you, it's two quite different reactions to zombies. A more group of regular people, you may have seen Shaun of the Dead. You probably haven't seen every single bizarre and gory Italian zombie film from the 1970s, right? Other groups that I talked to had. But kind of everybody saw Shaun of the Dead, and they thought it was funny, and they thought it was interesting, and they paid money to see it. And then that was repeated this year with Zombieland, right? Everybody went and saw that. So I think that's the other thing about zombies is they do, even though they're much gorier than other types of horror films potentially, they can also be sort of non-threatening because they're funny, they're slapstick, they can be played in that way. So first thing you have to note about zombies, huge appeal. Huge appeal across a broad audience, and then very fanatical kind of appeal for a smaller group. All right. Even after all that, if you still don't know what zombies are and what they do, well, I gave you basically the four kind of rules of zombies. When you talk about zombies today, this is what you mean in one form or another, but without too much variation on these rules. Fans of genre fiction, be it science fiction, fantasy, or horror, they tend to get really focused on rules, and they don't like rules to be broken. And zombie fans are like that. So first thing you probably should know is that when you talk about zombies today, and any time really for the last 40 years, so from 1968 on, you're not talking about zombies in the sense of hypnotized or entranced or drugged people under the spell of some voodoo magic kind of form of mind control. That was the prevailing meaning of the word up until 1968. With Romero and his zombie films, it veers off into this new, and it's even called, and by most people they're even called simply Romero zombies, but they've become the norm. These zombies today that you'll see in any film, video game, or book, they are really dead people. They're not just, as I said, they're not just entranced or drugged or hypnotized people, they're all the way dead. So they're animated corpses. Okay, so the idea is corpses get up and walk around. Now again, even within that, you have to offer the fans some kind of rationalization for it. But it's usually a pretty thin rationalization. Because again, if you're willing to accept the premise that corpses get up and walk around, there's only so much you can do with trying to rationalize this. Right? But people do like, again, people in the hardcore fan base love to debate different fine points of zombie physiology. All right, we won't do that tonight. All right. Despite all likelihood of it ever happening, corpses get up and walk around. As I say, there's never very much time spent on why this is so. There's usually some nod at the beginning of the book or the movie that it's either a biological weapon gone awry. There's some vague reference to radiation, as though that would cause it, or a virus. Some sort of pretty quickly dismissed and very vaguely defined sort of threat, which goes a long way to explaining the whole genre. The genre is not about what caused this, really. It's about how people are going to react to it. So again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. It's about how people react to terrible, life-threatening, monstrous situations. Where those came from seems to just be a given. Much like I would say, monstrous bad things often are a given in our life. They just happen. And we are thrust into that situation. And the characters in zombie books and movies basically find themselves in that situation. What do I do now? There's no point in asking, why are these dead people trying to attack me? That's kind of a non-starting kind of question. The question is, what am I going to do? There is, however, I should note, as I put on the sheet there is always, I think, a hint in any zombie film or book that we've somehow brought this on ourselves. Again, that constant hint of biological war gotten out of hand, very typical sort of Promethean theme, that this is not just an accident, but that this is somehow potentially even divine payback and punishment. There is always a strong sense, as you'll see in the short film clip I'll show, there is always a strong sense that even if we can't explain it, one way to understand it or to frame the question is to say we're being punished, right, by some unseen demon or God. It doesn't really matter which side it's coming from. But we are being punished for all the bad things we've done. Alright, so you got dead people getting up and walking around. The main thing they do when they get up and walk around is they try to kill people who are still alive. They try to kill them because, of course, once they kill them, they'll get up and walk around. So that's the zombie's really method of reproduction. Important to note, a lot of what I've said so far and a lot of what I'll say in the whole course of the hour, zombies are a lot like vampires. They're dead, and yet they're moving around, and they still look like people. Okay, so they're humanoid, undead monsters. But the points at which they differ from vampires are quite telling. And this, in particular, is one of the main ways. Zombies are not sexy. Okay, I don't think. Again, I was kidding with Dr. Hill before the talk. If I give this talk to a horror convention, that's the first thing they're going to ask me during question and answer, is, when are you going to write a zombie sex novel? And the answer would be, that's gross stuff. And partly I said, not just because it's gross, but because that's the vampire's job. Okay, the vampire's job is to be undead and sexy. And he does that, or she does that, quite well. Alright? So you don't mess with somebody else's monster. Alright? The zombie's shtick is to just be totally uncontrolled rage, hunger, violence. That's him or her. Alright? He's not sexy. Alright? So another way to put it, I just said zombies are a lot like vampires. Another way to put it, I think, would be to say zombies are to a large extent de-eroticized vampires. They're vampires without the sexy aspect. Like vampires, of course, they feed on people. And again, the way they feed is quite telling of who they are and how they're presented. Vampires, again, feed on people in a very attractive, sexual, sensual way. Nice little nibble, bite. Usually that's part of almost foreplay. Right? Zombies aren't like that. Zombies grab you, they tear up in your stomach, and they try to rip out all your intestines. Very gross. Not sexy, not nice, or they try to smash your head open and pull your brain out, your brain stem out. Very unattractive. All right? Big theme, and again, totally new with Romero. There is nothing in previous zombie lore that would make you think they're cannibals, that they eat people. Any kind of pre-Romero zombie, he just kind of wanders around in a daze. He may try to hurt you or kill you, but he's not going to try to eat you. All right, so Romero really goes to some lengths, partly I know for the gross out factor. He's a horror movie maker, that's part of his job. So a big part of it's the gross out factor. But I think he's also hitting on, he wants these zombies to be this symbol of self-destruction. Right? Humanity is preying on itself. Humanity is destroying itself, eating itself alive. It seems to be a big theme throughout his work. And the only way to kill a zombie, somehow destroy its brain. Bullet to the head, blow to the head, set it on fire. Some combination thereof. Alright? Again, telling difference from vampires. Vampires, how do you kill them? Stake through the heart. Vampires are about passion, they're about feeling, they're about drive. Zombies, kind of the reverse. It's not that zombies are particularly intelligent, they're quite the opposite, right? They're really slow. But the point is, something's wrong with their brain, right? Something isn't functioning right there. So how do you stop them finally? You get rid of this badly functioning brain. You make it cease to function, and the zombie will finally be put to rest. It's also a fairly unmagical kind of death, right? Unlike the vampire, where you still have a lot of the trappings of superstition and magic, whether it's garlic or holy water, obviously, or a cross. All those things very much identify vampires, I think, still with a religious and superstitious kind of background. All kind of modern zombies do try to rationalize it in that way. If the thing is animated because its nervous system is still active, well, then if you eradicate the brain, you'll stop the nervous system, right? So again, it's sort of quasi-rational, quasi-medical explanation for it. All right. Unlike my horror fans, I don't want to dwell on all the details of zombie physiology, as I said, but I wanted to get you up to speed with what do zombies do, and what are the kind of rules that they follow. I think those are the basic ones. You can fiddle around with other things with them, but you got to have those if you're gonna talk about or write your own zombie work today. All right. Why so popular? Why so popular now and for a while now, and some unforeseen date in the future? Well, of course, the first thing everybody wants to ask me or wants to try as a first guess, and it's a perfectly good guess, is, well, this must be post-9/11 fears. Post-9/11 fears of terrorism, of being totally wiped out by some foreign force that we can't quite stop and we don't quite understand and comes at us unexpectedly. Sure, that's got to play a big part in it. All right, we get a lot of residual and abiding fears after that as a society. However, you'd have to fine-tune that a little bit for a bunch of reasons. Partly it's that the zombie renaissance, if you want to call it that, considerably predates 9/11. I hadn't even realized how old Resident Evil was. That goes all the way back to 1996 and was a hugely popular game and helped catch the zombie craze back into pop culture. So I would say, yeah, the timing was good. The timing fit a lot of our fears, and I would go back before 9/11. I think it also played into Y2K fears of millennial destruction, end of the world stuff. So all of that certainly spurred it on. But I think the zombie was already gathering momentum as a popular, modern metaphor and monster that we found particularly interesting and more interesting than some of the older ones. So what I was trying to push about the zombie is that I think they do a good job of combining some fears that are sort of timeless and that we're always going to have just because we're human, and some fears that are very topical and very much oriented to the particular situation that we find ourselves in now. So, for example, under timeless things that people are always going to be afraid of? Well, of course, every monster you're going to ever have has some aspect of your fear of death. Every monster, the main thing the monster is going to do to you one way or another is it's going to kill you. But what zombies do differently, I think, and what is constantly reiterated in their stories, is that they also are, it's more about your, not just your fear of death, but your fear of the dead. The dead have come back. The dead are angry with you. That's a pretty potent metaphor across time. And a pretty potent metaphor that doesn't need, again, the concrete trappings of a monster or a made-up fiction like a zombie. It's something that we all worry about. Are the dead satisfied with us? Are we displeasing them, or are we living up to their expectations? That seems to be a pretty primal fear that we all have, even under normal circumstances. Again, in all my comments, you should just think, how is the zombie a sort of overly literal version of a normal fear? So I think it's normal to be afraid of living up to the expectations of the people who have come before us and died. Zombies make that concrete by having the dead people come back to life and try to kill us. Right? So they're just making it too literal. They're just making it concrete in that way. And as I noted before, big difference from vampires. Unlike vampires, it's no fun to be a zombie. Right? On a different panel, I was sitting with a vampire and zombie author. And then we were talking about the difference between vampires and zombies. And the one author pointed out quite correctly that when he was young and he heard that there were vampires, the first thing he asked was, where are they? I want to meet one so I can become one. This sounds great, right? I get to live forever. I get to be a super strong, immortal, indestructible, hypersexual version of myself. That's great. That's all pluses, right? Zombies, not so much, right? I get to be a stupid, slow, drooling version of myself. I don't want to, no memory, right? I just wander around and do nothing. Don't want to be that, all right? So it's not just a fear of any old death, right? Because the biological death comes to all of us. It's a fear of sinking into this blob, right? This meaningless existence that zombies have. They are, like all monsters that are people come back from the dead, they embody a lot of our fears of, our literal fears of a corpse. Right? A corpse is a very confusing object, right? Or what do I even call it? Is it an object or is it a person? And that's exactly the problem that you see with these kinds of monsters, is to what extent are they still human? To what extent do I feel remorse when I have to kill one? To what extent do I simply exterminate them the way I would vermin or other things that threaten my well-being? They're a lot different. If it looks like a person, it raises a lot more moral dilemmas and difficulties. The way that throughout any kind of religious tradition, a corpse is not just trash. It's not just something to be gotten rid of. It has to be regarded with reverence and fear and a kind of abhorrence, that you want to get rid of it, and it is somehow polluted. Like I say, all monsters try to kill you, but zombies make that much worse. It's very unpleasant, I assume, to be killed and eaten by anything, be they sharks or piranhas or bears or whatever. But zombies are going to make that worse, because it's even worse to be killed and eaten by by a person, and even worse by someone you know. That's going to ramp up the whole grotesquerie of the whole scene, right? Especially because humans don't really have the equipment for killing and eating other things, right? We don't have very sharp teeth and claws, so it's going to take us a while to gnaw each other to death, right? So it's going to be gross and messy and weird. So any kind of feeding frenzies that you see in zombie films are much, much worse than you would see in Jaws or a piranha movie, like anything where animals are killing people. And going in the other direction, as I said, most of the more thoughtful films and books make some mention that the human survivors are suffering, stress and trauma from having to kill zombies, from having to kill people. That this is not the same as trying to just shoot monsters or animals. That the residual humanity of a zombie fills the surviving people with this sense of guilt and dread at what they have to do to survive. Now, as I say, I think that's strongly contrasted or in strong tension with an equally strong pull in the other direction. The whole reason zombie video games are so popular is precisely because, to be blunt, part of us likes shooting people in the face. It has to appeal to us at some level, or you wouldn't sell millions and millions of games for people to do that. And zombies, of course, dress it up so nicely, right? Now I can shoot this person in the face, oh, but it's not really a person, so it's okay. Right? That's the whole appeal of zombie games, and what makes them so much more appealing than shooting a robot or an animal or anything else. You get to shoot people in the face without feeling bad about it. That's what Resident Evil or Left 4 Dead or any of those games do. So that's a pretty strong pull in both directions. That on the one hand, the video games are sort of encouraging you to shoot these things in the face, and the books and movies, on the other hand, are raising the appropriate moral quandary and dilemma over that. So I think you've got a genre that really does some of both. Right, so I'd say those are pretty universal fears just of being human, and ramped up in this kind of literalized version of zombies. And onto those fears, for the last 10 or 12 years, I think, or even longer, have been added certain current fears. Some are current of the modern world in general, some are current for the last 8 to 10 years. So for example, as you'll see in 1 minute with the film clip I'll show, look how much zombies have gotten associated with consumerism. One of the things I didn't mention when I talked about the influence of zombies in all the different media that they exist in. There's been a huge explosion in the last few years of zombie walks, or marches, depending on who organizes it. These are all over. These used to just be a couple of these a year in major cities. And now, practically every town and city has a zombie walk before Halloween. Some of them have started adding them before Easter, too, as this kind of blasphemous, impious version of it. All right? And where do all the zombie walks always take place? In the mall. Okay, they don't walk other places. They walk in the mall. So that's something where Romero has completely taken over. First he defined the zombie as what it was, then he put it in the mall, and now everybody associates zombies with malls. They probably associate them with that because malls are, in their own strange way, they're kind of creepy. You go there, you don't really think much, right? And you just sort of wander around like a zombie. All right? So good kind of topical fear, and one that has existed now for as long as we've had malls, which I guess is about 30 years or so. And another very typical modern fear that totally goes along with the essence of the being of zombies is what I alluded to a minute ago. It's not fun to be a zombie. I think that really embodies this idea that one of our main fears as modern people is that we don't want to sink into this meaningless existence, and which is another way of saying we're constantly afraid that our life is going to be meaningless. We're just not going to amount to anything, like the zombie doesn't. Right? He doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything. His life is pointless, or he doesn't even have a life. His existence is pointless. Right? I think the idea that the zombie isn't going to kill you, that's not the bad part. The zombie's going to make you like him. Right? He's going to make you into this meaningless monster. Again, that is an overly literal version of what we all fear, that our lives are just going to come to the end and it's not going to mean anything. It's not going to have amounted to anything. It's going to be purposeless and pointless. Zombies make that very concrete. And then for the last 8 years at least, I would say you've definitely got fears of terrorism, war, fear of the other, but also I'd underline, please don't equate zombies just with terrorists. I don't really see that equation as very apt. Because the whole essence of zombies is that in any version of the story, who's attacking you? The people around you. You're being attacked by your neighbors, friends, and family who have turned into zombies. So it's very hard for me to see that they represent terrorists, right? Because those are other. Those are people not like you. They're people from some other land. So what I often think zombies are standing in for is fear of our own society. Fear of our own society, and again, this kind of sinking into an anonymous sort of mass that way. So you may be wondering about halfway through the talk, okay, that's great. What's all this have to do with Dante? I'm sure you're wondering that. So I have a clip, it's a very short clip, 4.5 minutes from the original Dawn of the Dead that I think will be a good segue both into what happens in zombie movies and into Dante. That's very loud.
What the hell is it? It's like a shopping center, one of those big indoor malls.
That probably is clear enough, but to connect the dots, as I'm sure you could. Fran asked at the beginning there, why are they here? Why do they come here? Well, this was an important place in their lives. What are they? They're us. And then at the end, the only two surviving people flee the mall, and the zombies take it over. Well, that's what got me connecting Dante and zombies, obviously through the lens and through the connection of Inferno. And in particular, the two lines that I underlined there in the middle of the sheet there. If you look at, when you look at it later, 3:16 in Inferno. We are at the place where earlier I said you could expect to see the suffering race of souls who lost the good of intellect. That's Virgil to Dante describing the damned. And then 5:37, just as crucial, perhaps even a little bit more detail to it, and a little bit more zombie-ish to it. I learned that to this place of punishment, all those who sin in lust have been condemned, those who make reason slave to appetite. All right? So, who are the damned? They are those who have lost their intellect and who have made reason slave to appetite. That's pretty much a zombie as defined by Romero, as I've talked about so far this evening. All right? They're just hunger. That's all they are. And if you go through the opening cantos, especially the opening 7 circles in Dante's Inferno, especially, those are the sins of appetite, uncontrolled desire. Right? So that's what got me thinking about connecting the two, either first in a nonfiction version and then in the fictional versions. And in the interest of moving it on into Purgatorio now, I mean, it seems pretty clear that the connection between Inferno and zombies aren't too far-fetched. But what does all this have to do, if anything, with Purgatorio? Is there something more we can say about Dante's depiction there of the purging or the cleansing of sin and what he sees as the process there? Well, I found a couple lines that helped me understand it a little better in light of zombies. 1791. Yes. Virgil again explaining to Dante what this place is all about. Neither creator nor his creatures ever, my son, lacked love. There are, as you well know, two kinds, the natural love and the rational. Natural love may never be at fault, the other may, by choosing the wrong goal, by insufficient or excessive zeal. And while it is fixed on the eternal good and observes temperance, loving worldly goods, it cannot be the cause of sinful joys. But when it turns toward evil or pursues some good with not enough or too much zeal, the creature turns on his Creator then. So you can now understand how love must be the seed of every virtue growing in you, and every deed that merits punishment. I think that's one of the most important set of lines in the whole comedy, because it broadens out now that now Dante's theory is not just that sins at the beginning of Inferno are a matter of desire, but lo and behold, it really turns out that all human behavior, anything that we do is somehow motivated by desire or love. It's translated both ways, right, as he talks about it. Now, that's a much more broader theory of human action, that we are by nature desirous creatures. And it's already been hinted at, I think, in those lines I read, but look at how he describes it in the next canto, 18, line 55. So man cannot know where his cognizance of primal concepts comes from, or his bent for those primary objects of desire. These are a part of you, just like the zeal of bees for making honey. The primal will is neither laudable nor blamable. So he broadens it out there, that the beginning of desire, or the beginning of love, the beginning of love is this uncontrollable, sort of undifferentiated desire, right? This primal zeal, right? So again, a much broader sense of what motivates people. And zombies would be a version of that, obviously, minus reason, minus will even, right? Zombies really don't have will either. They don't really want anything. They just brass. They just brag indiscriminately. So zombies are, again, a degraded form of that, but they still are recognizably human. Or, to put it the other way, we're not that removed from zombies. We are like zombies. It's just that we have some amount of reason and control and direction to this burning desire or desires that are always within us. Now, I did want to underline, as part of this, and as partly to the answer to the question, you know, why did I write this? Why did I write this version of Dante the way I did? And what differentiates these later parts of the comedy from the earlier parts? Well, it really only clicked for me, and I really was only able to write the fictional version, not my analysis of it. I could do an analysis of Dante previously. But I could only write the fictional version when I thought more and more about the figure of Beatrice, or Beatrice, if you want to have a stricter Italian pronunciation. She is a big difference between Purgatorio and Inferno. She's been talked about plenty by that point. We know who she is, and we know why she's going to appear. But I was struck when I was your age and I first read the comedy at her appearance, at what a strong impression she made, obviously on Dante, but also on me through Dante. And I didn't feel that I could write a version of Dante until I understood her better than I had over the years and understand his feelings for her better. So I really just had to think more about Beatrice before I could work with Dante more. So I just wanted to underline at the end here a few points about her that maybe you would find interesting in your study of the Purgatorio and the Paradiso. First, I hope I don't go against anyone else's interpretation, but I'm fairly insistent that Beatrice cannot be only allegorical. And you may have read this, and again, even if your teachers here aren't pushing it, certainly you would read that in enough commentaries or footnotes, that she is just an allegory. And I don't think that works for Dante. I don't think that works for what he's trying to do. He's trying, because so much of what he's trying to do throughout the play is show you how earthly loves lead to something higher. And if she's just an allegory, well, how would that prove his point? She has to prove his point by being an earthly love that he had. An earthly love that led to something more. So she has to be, I think, at some level real. Now, of course, she has to be at some level that something more. He's had plenty of examples of people whose earthly loves did not lead beyond anything. That's all of Inferno. That's what Inferno is populated with. People whose earthly loves wedded them, locked them, trapped them in the flesh and on earth. Purgatorio is about, I don't even like the word purge. It's not really about purging, I don't think. Purgatorio is about the perfecting, the purifying of loves that are earthly for the heavenly and higher and spiritual and perfect referent to which they point. All right? And Beatrice is one of those, the primary one of those for Dante. So start with that she has some higher meaning. She's not just a person who lived in Florence at the same time as he does, but of course that goes for everyone. Everyone to a poet means more than just their concrete reality. But they have to have that concrete incarnation, that instantiation as a particular person that they are. So I just want to read these couple lines near the end of the Purgatorio, because they strike me, if the lines I just read from the middle of the Purgatorio, from Canto 17 and 18, those give this very kind of abstract theory of love, right? Where Virgil, typical Virgil, right? He's talking in very abstract, reasoned, scholastic terms. Here's what love is, Dante. I'm going to explain it to you. And Beatrice gives him the real version of that. And he describes the real version of what it is to actually experience this kind of love that is freeing and not trapping. Look at it at 3146. This is her talking. Master master your feelings, listen to my words, and you shall learn just how my buried flesh was meant to guide you in another way. You never saw in nature or in art a beauty like the beauty of my form, which clothed me once and now is turned to dust. And if that perfect beauty disappeared when I departed from the world, how could another mortal object lure your love? When you first felt deception's arrow sting, you should have rushed to rise and follow me as soon as I lost my deceptive flesh. Right? You get a flesh at the beginning of the quotation and flesh at the end. By the end it's being called deceptive. But of course, all in between, it is meant to lead, it was meant and didn't, according to her interpretation, lead him to something more. Lead him to this higher love, this higher beauty. All right? All very Platonic, all throughout Dante's work. And then immediately after that, same canto. Yes, now we have Dante talking about her instead of her talking to him. 1,000 yearning flames of my desire held my eyes fixed upon those brilliant eyes that held the griffin fixed within their range. Like sunlight in a mirror shining back, I saw the twofold creature in her eyes, reflecting its two natures separately. Imagine, reader, how amazed I was to see the creature standing there unchanged, yet in its image changing constantly. Again, he only witnesses the griffin through her. Right? She is that vehicle for that higher epiphany, the higher revelation there at that point. And I'm just struck in that final quotation, of course, how much it's about his remaining desire, love, fascination, really, with her. He can't look at the griffin by itself. He can only look at it through her. I don't know how much you all talk about, and I'm running a bit out of time here, so I'll just make it very brief. I don't know how much you all talk about the tradition of courtly love or troubadour love. It's this idea that Dante had that this kind of love shouldn't really ever be acted on in a physical, concrete sense. That's what he thinks he had with Beatrice. It's very, to me, sort of strange kind of concept, and I remember whenever I would teach Dante here, I would say, a little strange. He really is. He really, I mean, it's a nice poem and all, but I mean, if you really had someone acting like this, you really call him sort of a stalker, right? I mean, he follows this woman around and never talks to her or anything, and says that she's the love of his life. That's I don't know if that's a very good way to act, but it is an interesting way to look at how desire is somehow directed towards something not limiting, but something higher and limitless. And there was an understanding of Dante that I only came to very gradually over time, and that I came to this past year when I was reading a totally different work, but one that gave me some, I suppose, more insight into what he was getting at with this strange concept of unrequited love that you don't act upon, but that nonetheless drives and motivates your life, the way that he describes here. That's this poem from shortly before his wife called The Romance of the Rose. I don't necessarily recommend that you go out and read it. It's a very strange, allegorical, even more allegorical than Dante. It's a very strange poem, but it helped me get a handle on how I would talk about him as a character and how I would talk about Beatrice as a character in my own work. All right, I'm almost glad that I'm nearly out of time, because that way I won't have to read you a passage from the novel. I get very shy reading my fiction in public. I can read my nonfiction in public, and I love talking to you about it, but reading fiction still makes me kind of nervous. So I just want to say what I tried to do in the novel, and what I did different than Dante, was I put Beatrice in the Inferno. That's the main, besides the zombies, that's the main shtick to the whole book. Dante gives you Virgil leading him through Inferno. I give you Virgil and Beatrice leading him through Inferno. And that gave me, I thought, some interesting interpretive moments where you could see how Beatrice, either in her allegorical role as divine love, or perfect love, or Caritas, or whatever you want to call her, or in her role as a real human being, how she would offer a different insight into these awful people that they meet along the way. Virgil would, of course, provide the reasonable, rational, logical explanation for what's going on, and she would give this much more intuitive, passionate, emotional response. And oftentimes I wouldn't even necessarily have her say anything. She would just do something. So Dante and Virgil would be having this debate about what's going on, and she would just step in and do whatever needed to be done under the circumstances, whether it was move along or kill the zombie or whatever it was. So she became much more a figure of action, whereas Dante and Virgil are these sort of overly analytical, kind of dithering sort of characters. And that was part of the fun of the work. Taking her out of Purgatorio and putting her into Inferno. All right. So I don't know if Dante and zombies make as much sense together as to you as they do to me, or if they're like peanut butter and chocolate for Reese's. But that's what they are to me. And I'm trying to give you a little taste of that this evening. So basically, I have Dante stumble upon a zombie uprising. Right? There's zombies attacking people. And he's thrust in the middle of that. And as he goes along, of course, if you know Inferno, you know that everywhere he goes, he's meeting the same kinds of people or zombies that he met in the equivalent point in Inferno. So the shtick or the hook of the whole idea of the novel is that he saw these horrible things happen. He saw people being burned alive, eaten alive, boiled in pitch, frozen in ice, torn apart, and eaten. He saw all those horrible things, and that's what inspired him later to write the Inferno. So the zombie uprising becomes the fictional inspiration for the real book, Inferno. Thank you for pushing me to clarify. Different audience. Horror convention, they go straight for the zombie sex, but... Sir.
Not on the note of your book, but you know World War Z?
Sure.
Max Brooks in there, I remember reading something later on where he talks about how in America, zombie things are, as you said, very popular, partially because of American individualism, and that sort of sense that we can kind of take problems and handle it ourselves.
Good.
Do you agree with that sort of sentiment? Did you read World War Z? Or?
Yep. Yeah, and that's I think Max is obviously a much better version of someone who's theorized about zombies and then written his version. Yeah, I think a big part of the appeal of zombies, and I didn't get into this because again I didn't think that was the kind of group I was talking to, but when I talk to some groups, I get a little uneasy because they obviously really dig the zombie genre because they really like to stockpile guns and they really like to think about how when the zombies come they're going to get to use those guns and without those inconvenient law-abiding people stopping them. Right? So there is this strong sort of kind of strange survivalist bent to it, and I think Brooks partly taps into that, right? Because a big part of Brooks's book is to fantasize, as all of us who like zombie movies have done, fantasize, how would I survive a zombie apocalypse, Would I go to the mall? Would I go to the gun store? Would I go up on the roof? Would I push you all out of the way and try to feed you to them? I mean, what would I do exactly, right? So this kind of fantasizing about these survivalist techniques, Brooks does a great job. Yeah, I think that's a big part of the shit. So when I talk about what zombies mean, they would want to say, well, no, how would you kill them? you like a 38 long barrel or what? I mean, it's very specific.
So how did zombies teach your Dante character, to better himself, like people do in Purgatorio and Inferno?
Right. They teach him the essence of sin. Not, they don't sit down and teach him. Just by seeing them, the way he sees the sinners in Inferno, teaches him about the essence of sin. I had to alternate zombie and human characters, and partly that was to get at the difference that I'm sure you remember from Inferno between the lower circles and the upper circles. So the zombies do a good job of representing the sins of the upper circles, just appetite. I have a lot of human characters come in and behave very cruelly and viciously and deceitfully, either towards one another or towards the zombies, and that of course represents the lower circles. So yeah, zombies aren't always the perfect metaphor because they don't, other than gluttony, they really can't represent too many sins, right? That's kind of all they do. They're not going to try to deceive you, for example. Or they're not going to be treacherous because they don't know how. Or they don't remember how. Anybody read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies? All right, I have to try that, because that's another question I get asked a lot. It's another example of something that nobody expected, just a few months ago, for that to be. Well, I don't want to keep anyone here convinced.